The second lesson we've almost worn out in weddings and funerals, but for all of that it remains at the heart of our understanding of the love of God and one another. Let me read it in a little different translation. I may speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but if I have no love, I'm a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. I may have the gift of prophecy and the knowledge of every truth. I may have faith enough to move mountains, but if I have no love, I am nothing. I may give all I possess to the needy. I may give my body as a martyr, but if I have no love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love envies no one, is never boastful, never conceited, never rude. Love does not insist on its own way in life, is never quick to take offense. Love keeps no score of wrongs, takes no pleasure in the failures of others, but delights in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But we need to talk about love. We really do need to talk about love. Because talk of it is everywhere, and if there was ever a slipperier word in the English language, I don't know what it is. I love New York in June. How about you? Don't you just love Margie's new home? Or there's that ubiquitous red heart on bumper stickers and coffee mugs. I love my dog. I love my cat. I love sailing. I love Michigan, or believe it or not, I saw it coming at me, or rather going away from me on a bumper. I love pasta. Excuse me, even the kids have gotten into the jargon. Donna White tells how one day her son came home from kindergarten and said, "Mom, I have a new girlfriend. Patricia and I are in love." Surprised at his use of the words, she asked how he knew that he was in love. "She told me," he replied. And most of the music coming at us day in and day out is about love, whether it's Schubert or rock and roll or country western. The only thing is country western, as I noted last summer when I strayed into its precincts up in Michigan, is mostly about love's lost. There actually is a country western song entitled, "When you leave, please walk out backwards so I'll think you're coming in." And love came down at Christmas. So the word has lost so much integrity and clear meaning that one hesitates to use it one more time. But we don't have a whole lot of choice. The ancient Greek solved the problem through the use of several different words. Eros for romantic, possessive love, I love you and I want you. Philos for family and fraternal feelings like you experience at the summer reunion. And then agape for God and neighbor love. Or rather, to put it more accurately, where we are forced to use one word, the word love, they talked about three different and distinct ways of feeling and being, all of them legitimate, but all differing in use and importance. But I guess we're stuck with our language and that word. I can't imagine anybody singing, "I agapao you." So the best we can do is try to be clear about what we mean, because our life may well depend on it. Let me give you three other words this morning that may help us to stay clear about what it means when it is used of our faith and by our faith. The attitude that Paul is talking about in this much used chapter of his letter to Corinth, the attitude really centers on that little four-letter word care. If you go back to your King James Bible, you will read, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not charity." But that's not much help, because the word charity has changed radically since 300 years ago. Now it means what you do for the poor. But back then it was derived from the Latin word caritas, from which we get our word care. So to say I love someone in the way that St. Paul is talking about is to say that I care. I care about their joys and their sorrows, their health and their well-being. I really care. Even if I don't particularly like them, if I'm not crazy about them, am not in love with them, I care. Does not exclude these other possibilities, but it generally transcends them as a serious and attentive interest in, concern about, compassion for another human being as a human being. I really love means whatever else I may feel, I really do care. And I think the word is a good one because it suggests that in this kind of love, my attention and interest and involvement are really out beyond myself and my own needs and my own feelings. It is with the growth and health of the other. Here's a feeling and attitude that is really not focused on payoff, not on what I may want, but on what I can do for the well-being of another human being. Care. Simple, selfless care. And says an old story, that is what your God is really all about. That is what he supremely is, care. The creator and ruler of the universe cares. The Greeks thought this was crazy, you know. Everybody knew that God was supreme intelligence, super brain, cosmic genius, philosopher. God thinks, said the Hellenist. No, said a Jewish young man out of Nazareth, God cares for sparrows and flowers and little kids and you, every one of you, indiscriminately. Not just for your spouse or children or longtime friend, but all of you. And to make this point indelibly and unmistakably clear, he took his care for his people, his friends and his enemies, to the point of death, so that they would know it clear and clean and true. And the difference is critical. If God is in the thinking business, then to get close to him, you do what? You go to Harvard and think a lot, or some lesser institution. If God is in the caring business, you get close to him, well, how? You go where someone needs caring for. This is not to say that care is without intelligence. Love does not simply mean submitting to the will of others. Real care for the other does not mean simply doing what they want. Love of God and neighbor, mark me, does not necessarily demand staying forever in a relationship, an intimate relationship, where one is abused. It means wise action, maybe even inaction at times, on the basis of what you think is truly best for the other. It means to truly care about what is for their good and growth as well as your own. Dennis Waitley tells of visiting a young couple, highly intelligent, with advanced degrees, who were just certain that they were loving their 5-year-old Bradford into being a real winner. Dennis writes, entering the front door, I instantly recognized that this was Bradford's place. I thought I recognized an Ethan Hale piece that had suffered the wrath of Cain. Trying to find a place to sit was like hopping on one foot through a minefield blindfolded. Bradford, of course, got to eat first in the living room with us so that he wouldn't be lonely. He dumped his dinner on the carpet and proceeded to pour his milk over it. His mother said, Brad, honey, don't do that. Mommy wants you to grow up strong and healthy like Daddy. I'll get you some more dinner while Daddy cleans it up. That is not love that cares. The late Margaret Hillis, perhaps you remember her, director of the Chicago Symphony Choir, loved to tell the story of how when she was a young girl, she was playing by a pond near her home when she fell into water that, as far as she could tell, was probably over her head. She remembered thinking that she must swim, and she did. Crawling up onto solid ground, already worrying about what her punishment would be, she saw her father sitting on the bank. He'd made no move to rescue her, just as he now made no move either to congratulate her or to take her to task. She says, you know, there was a strange comfort in all that. He had let me learn to depend upon myself, and yet he was there if I had needed him. To truly care is to do not necessarily the easy thing or the impulsive thing or the applauded thing, but it is to do the right thing for that person at that time. This is not to say that love can't at times be very soft and indulgent. It can mean gentle acceptance of the one who has failed. But it can mean driving crooks out of the temple court. It all depends upon judgment, a judgment as to what is truly helpful, what truly makes for health and life. And it's not always easy, and you can't always be certain you're making the right move. This is not to say that caring always means liking someone. I may find my children, my friend, or the colleague, or even the stranger distinctly unlikable on occasion. I've always appreciated C.S. Lewis, who said, "Thank God he commanded me to love my neighbor, not to like him." Even if I'm turned off, though, by someone, I still can care for that human being as human being. In fact, one of the realities we need to face and remember is that the people out there who need our love and care the most are often those who are not particularly likable at the moment. The old story says that's the way God cares, not by giving us what we always want, but by being there for us in life and death, in success and failure, no matter what comes and no matter how we're doing. And as we learn to trust and live that same kind of care, we discover what God and life are really all about. This kind of love cares, and this kind of love bears. That is, this kind of love has the power to sustain and transform and heal because it's willing to put up with the other when he is not so lovable, when he does fall down, when he is a pain. There's the story about the family that had to move, and when the day arrived, the husband announced he had an important meeting and would be unable to help. It was a short neighborhood move, so the woman set about, not too happily, to handle the thing alone. After the van finally left the new house and she found herself standing in the living room surrounded by clothes to be unpacked, appliances to be hooked up, a screaming baby, and a 5-year-old who decided to throw one of his metal toys through the picture window, she'd about had it. Nobody was hurt, but the glass was scattered everywhere, and a brisk wind was blowing in through the opening. The wife was now so upset that she was determined to call her husband and fill him in. But the secretary, of course, told her that her husband was in a meeting and inquired sweetly as to whether she would like to leave a message. Since her husband was not very good at responding to messages, she had to think for a moment. But she came up with this: "Yes, just tell him that the insurance will cover it all and he can call home for details." That's the way life is often with one another, but love hangs in there. For better or worse, it takes bearing with one another, folks. Thus, to love in this way is always to suffer one another. That's what this old language about the cross means, I think. In traditional language, we talk about Jesus suffering for our mistakes, our failures, our sins. One might better say that Jesus presents us with the vision of a God who suffers our mistakes, failures, and sins, who bears with us. Let me put it this way. I offend you through carelessness or bad temper or indifference or God knows what. I deal rather shabbily with you on a given day. The result, an injustice has been done of sorts. The relationship has been troubled. And what can be done about it? You can, quite understandably, react by punishing me with your subtle rejection and anger. You can strike out and try to hurt. You have every right to do so. Justice ought to be done. But the end is the loss of one another, if just for a time. Or you can bear the hurt and go on caring about me as a human being. In the old English meaning of the word, you can suffer me. To trust ourselves to the love of God we see in the cross of Jesus is to believe that this is the way God deals with us, and therefore this is the redemptive way to go, to believe that in the long run, the caring that wins is the caring that is willing to bear. And of course, as Paul makes it quite clear in this old word, it is precisely those who are aware of their own weaknesses, their own failures, their own humanity, who are able to bear with the weakness and failure and humanity of others. So the love of Jesus, at least, cares and it bears and it shares. That is, love that hangs in there sooner or later shares the pains and suffering of the beloved. C.S. Lewis has also written, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken in time. If you want to make sure of keeping your heart intact, you must give it to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe and dark and motionless, it will change. Your heart will. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable. A man writes of friends who were given the heartbreaking news that their son had what appeared to be an incurable disease. Everybody was torn with pity for them, and they suffered. But they remained remarkably calm and complaining through it all. One night, as this man left their house and stood on their front stoop, he tried to express his admiration for their courage. The boy's father looked up at the stars and said, "Well, it seems to me that we have three choices. We can curse life and what it does to us at times and look for some way to express our rage. We can grit our teeth and endure, or we can accept the life given to us with Charlie each day as a gift. The first alternative is useless. The second is exhausting. The third enables us to go on really living and loving Charlie." But it's what life is all about, sharing the inevitable suffering that is part of life together. Is that maybe one reason why we find it so hard in our time, overindulged, many of us, addicted to our own pleasure and comfort, inclined to believe in and seek easy answers? We have little tolerance for pain and struggle anymore, little patience for the hard way. James Thurber, the humorist, once wrote in a bit of uncharacteristic outburst, "My pet antipathy is the bright detergent voice of the average American singer, male or female, yelling in cheap yammer songs about love. Americans are brought up without being able to tell love from lust or Snow White or Forever After. We think of it as a push-button solution or instant cure for discontent and a sure road to happiness, whatever it is. By our sentimental ignorance, we encourage love as a kind of tranquilizing drug. It's nothing of the kind." A woman of 47 who's been married 27 years and has 6 children knows what love is and once described it like this: "For me, love is what you have been through with somebody." And indeed, this old faith insists that in some strange and mysterious way, in the sufferings of Jesus of Nazareth, the eternal God shares our human pain and struggle, not lifting them from us, clearly, but going through them with us, so that we may know when it falls our turn, as it will, that he's not absent, but a very present help in time of trouble. In a recent volume called Proverbs of Ashes, Violence, Redemption, the Search for What Saves, 2 women, Rika Brock and Rebecca Parker, recount side by side the story of their lives of incredible abuse, broken relationships, severe trauma, abuse they had to learn to fight against or walk away from, misfortune they had to learn to conquer. But in the end, interestingly, they say that through it all they did discover the reality of the love of God. And they write, I think, beautifully of their experience. And I quote, "Nothing can separate us from the love of God. We make this affirmation in concert with countless witnesses who affirm the same. For us, there's nothing new in the affirmation except the newness of coming to know its truth in our own lives, not as a message passed on to us, but as a living discovery. Love is a seal upon the heart, a hunger to create, to honor life, to protect it, and to see it flourish. So this is God with us, quiet moments of mutual discovery by friends sharing coffee on a sunlit afternoon, tears appearing on a frozen face, a community meeting that resists violence, an embrace that holds the other through the terrors of the night, an old woman keeping faded photographs on a mirror. Let us say that life shows us the face of God only in fleeting glimpses, by the light of night fires, in dancing shadows, in departing ghosts, and in recollections of steady love. Let us say this is enough. Enough for us to run with perseverance the race that is set before us. Enough for us to stand against violence. Enough for us to hold each other in benediction and blessing. Enough for us to hold each other in benediction and blessing, the love that believes, hopes, bears, endures. The love, think of it, that never ends. Amen.